Inklings. On a small street in Oxford, there's a small, unassuming pub known as the Eagle and Child. It's a lot like other small pubs in the area, but there's one important distinction that sets it apart from all other such places in the UK. The Eagle and Child, known by locals as the Bird and Baby, was the setting of literary history. This pub was a meeting place for the authors of some of the most influential works in modern literature and storytelling. And in a small back room called the Rabbit Room, writers such as J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and C.S. Lewis, author of The Chronicles of Narnia, frequented this pub with other influential writers and professionals and discussed their personal writing projects. They offered writing critiques, suggestions, and support. This group later became known as the Inklings. The beginning of the famous Inklings group is often credited as starting after a luncheon between Lewis and Tolkien. The two were English professors at Oxford University and had met a few years prior at a faculty meeting. The close friendship of Lewis and Tolkien began with a very rocky start. They had opposing viewpoints on just about every topic, from religion and politics to department curriculum. They found common ground in discussions and readings of Old Norse mythology. Eventually, a strong friendship was formed. One afternoon in 1929, over lunch, Tolkien gave Lewis a manuscript of a poem he'd been working on and asked for Lewis's opinion and impressions. Lewis was delighted and very quick to offer praise of Tolkien's writing. Suggestions and specific critiques came soon after. Tolkien was thrilled to have someone who finally appreciated his work and was capable of offering worthwhile commentary. Pretty soon, their gatherings with other academics changed from reading old texts to sharing personal projects and offering critiques and support. The newly formed group took the name the Inklings from another reading club that had previously failed. Tolkien said about the name that it was a pleasantly ingenious pun, suggesting people with vague and half-formed intimations and ideas, plus those who dabble in ink. While the pub was a common meeting place for the Inkling members, it wasn't the only place where they met. They would go to the pub on Tuesdays for social gatherings. On Thursdays, they would meet at Lewis's quarters at Magdalen College at Oxford. This group was more of a friendship than an official club. There was no leader or agenda, and no official records of the meeting were kept. Warren Lewis, the brother of C.S. Lewis and fellow Inkling, was once quoted as saying, "The Inklings are neither a club nor a literary society, though it partook of the nature of both." Known members of the Inklings included C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Hugo Dyson, Warren Lewis, Owen Barfield, and Neville Coghill. It also included Christopher Tolkien, the son of J.R.R. Tolkien. Most members were academics and writers, but other influential peers were also included in the gatherings. During the breakout of World War II, many common goods became scarce. This included paper. For a writer during this era, with no laptops, this essentially was crippling to their creative endeavors. In order to combat this shortage, members of the Inklings would save scraps of paper from letters, envelopes, etc., and give them out to each other during their meetings. This action ensured that all of them would be able to continue writing when it would have been nearly impossible otherwise. While historians agree on the benefits the support system provided by the Inkling group, they do argue about just how great of an impact these informal gatherings had on individual works. However, there are indications that the friends were able to influence each other's writing a great deal. For example, there are journal entries where Tolkien mentions specific advice given to him by his peers. While writing The Hobbit, C.S. Lewis and others complained about the story having too much dialogue and not enough action. When comparing early manuscripts with later revised copies, it's obvious that Tolkien took their comments to heart. Sections of dialogue were condensed or removed, and there is an increased proportion of action added as replacement. After The Hobbit was such a success, Tolkien's publishers asked him to write a sequel. Nothing Tolkien wrote kept his interest, and he quickly grew bored and gave up. Lewis heard about this and responded by saying, "Of course you're bored. Hobbits are only interesting in un-Hobbit-like situations. This comment inspired Tolkien to keep writing. He eventually produced the Lord of the Rings trilogy. These books have become classics that influence the direction of today's fantasy writing and entertainment. The Inklings met regularly for 17 years before ending. One of the members, Hugo Dyson, wasn't a fan of Tolkien's work. Rather than offering critique, he complained about the story. Eventually, Tolkien started refusing to share what he'd written. This changed the atmosphere of the group, and pretty soon the Inklings just fizzled out. Still, it's undeniable that these books that came from the Inklings changed imaginative literature, especially the fantasy genre, forever. The Eagle and Child, a small pub on St. Giles Street, is now famous for the Inklings that met there and the great works that they produced. These writers re-sparked people's imaginations and interest in high fantasy. These works have inspired modern writers such as George R. Martin, Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, etc., and have even inspired other entertainment mediums, including music and film. Literature was changed forever, and all because a couple of friends got together to share their stories and ideas.